You guys are joining, we're going to be the agenda for today is we're going to do a little bit of very sort of light sort of teaching, just kind of introduce a couple frameworks for you guys specifically around how to use heat maps specifically to find wins on your PDP. And then we want to pretty quickly transition into doing some live PDP teardowns. So we've got a couple brands we can take a look at today that we've sort of prepped for, but we ideally would love to take a look at as many of y'all's brands as we can. So feel free. I'll prompt you guys here in a little bit to start sharing your URLs if you want to sort of sacrifice yourself as tribute to let us tear down your PDPs for you. But if you guys stick around here till the second half, then we will start to do some live PDP teardowns for anybody who is attending that wants their PDP torn down
With love.
with love, always with love,
We call it that New York love when you get a little brutal and tell it
a
forward.
little blunt.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think let's go ahead and kick this thing off, and we'll let people continue to join as we go here. So let me introduce the attendee, or sorry, the presenters today. So if you guys have been on one of our webinars before, either through the Commerce Lab newsletter or from Blue Stout, you guys are very familiar with myself. My name is Alan Burt. I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Stout. Blue Stout is a Shopify and e-commerce specific optimization firm. We specifically work with 7, 8, and 9-figure brands to help them optimize their storefronts, typically through A/B testing, design, and development. And we are a Shopify Plus partner as well. And I'm joined today by Eric Myers, who is our head of optimization over at Blue Stout, and also by Dylan Ander. And Dylan, do you want to go ahead and give everybody a quick intro on your background and heat map?
Yeah, super quick. I like to keep them brief so we can get right to it. Built my first two Shopify stores at 17. I started early in college, exited both of them actually before I graduated college. Built a couple agencies, a couple additional brands, to make a bunch of money, lose a bunch of money, make even more money, lose even more money. So gone on the entrepreneurial journey. I had my largest exit about 2 years ago of splittesting.com. If you had heard of us, we were, believed by volume, the largest CRO agency in the e-com space. So got a database of 4,000 split tests and parlaying that into heat map. My problem was always, okay, you have a split test before and after, but why did that split test win? You have no idea. You don't get metrics on each of those. You just have AOV, revenue per session, conversion rate, yada, yada. So I always wanted to know where on my website is money coming from. That's why we built heatmap.com. We had to break through a couple of crazy tech patents that we now have to just simply click a button and know what revenue passed through that button. And we have AI that honestly just tells you what to do based on about 17 trillion data points going on right now and all unique to your website. So that's what we do. Obviously, it doesn't replace a full CRO agency, just like Blue Stout, but definitely gives you that boost in the right direction and gives you analytics you never had access to before. And if you hate GA4, definitely sign up. It's 29 bucks for the bottom package, and most people hate GA4, so I feel like that's a TLDR.
I think everybody hates GA4. I don't think I've talked to anybody who's like, man, GA4 was an upgrade to what it used to be.
uh, Agree. That's why we built how we did.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk about what's on the agenda for today. So, what we want to be talking about today, and again, we have a few folks that are still flooding in here, but we'll go and get things rolling. So, the agenda for today is we are going to focus specifically on optimizations for your product page. And specifically, what we want to do is first is sort of just touch base on some best practices. At the end of the day, analytics and heat mapping are phenomenal tools for finding the areas of opportunity in your pages, specifically your product pages. But a lot of you guys, specifically when we do teardowns, have missed a lot of the sort of fundamental basics. So let's talk about sort of the fundamental basics and the framework we like to use when we design PDPs, because I think it's a framework that most people don't follow when they design their product pages. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and transition over to Dylan and let him sort of walk through exactly what a heat map is. So obviously, heatmap.com is a very specific type of heat mapping software, but let him sort of talk through what you should be, why even use a heat map? What are you going to glean from the information from a heat map? How should you read a heat map, etc. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and transition over to Eric. And Eric's going to give you guys a couple of very specific tactics and some very specific learnings that you can derive from your heat map information and then transition those into actual optimizations on your PDP. So that way you guys can actually walk away today with a few very specific optimizations that you could be making. So we're going to do that here for probably the first 20 or so minutes, and then we're going to transition to live teardowns, and we'll tear down as many folks here as we can get to that are joining us today, and then we also have a couple other brands that we can tear down as well if we have some time. All right, so I think let's go ahead and jump in. And also, guys, feel free if you have questions at any point as we're going through any of this information today. The more conversational we can make this, the more interactive we can make this, the better. So feel free just to throw those questions in, and we'll just try to field those as we go. We always find that's super helpful. Okay, so real quick, let's just talk about sort of the basics. And we consider this to be sort of the foundation. So whenever our team is working with a brand and we are either designing that store from scratch or we're looking at doing a revamp, we always start at what we like to call sort of first principles, in the product page conversion formula that we like to start with is a framework that we like to call emotion plus logic. And the reason I bring this up is because at the end of the day, no matter what you sell, and truly, it does not matter if you sell hammers, it does not matter if you sell supplements, it doesn't matter if you sell high ticket items or low ticket items. At the end of the day, every consumer that's coming to the site is making a decision in essentially two stages. The first one is always going to be emotional, and the second is always going to be a logical justification of whatever that emotional decision was. And so the idea is, as marketers, we need to be thinking about our product pages through the lens of how is a consumer actually buying. And so every brand is going to be different. Every product is going to be different in terms of how you apply the framework. But you need to first sit down and say, okay, what is driving that emotional decision? Let's say you sell shoes, right? Somebody shows up to the site. That's going to be a very design driven, very fashion driven, very function driven decision. That's going to be an emotional cue that they're going to have. They're going to see that product and get, oh, those are going to look great with these pants. Or like, oh, I'm going on vacation. Like, I need these before I leave. There is an emotional internal decision they are making to want to buy your product, either because they desire it or it just solves a problem that they are looking to solve for. And so when we think about product page design, we always need to be first leveraging how can we emotionally pull that buyer in. Branding is important, imagery is important, sales copy is important, really understanding what drives that emotional trigger for your product and your consumer is step one. And then step two is after they have made that sort of initial emotional step, the brain's going to kick in and they're going to start sort of questioning that decision. And that's where logic steps in. And then they start to ask questions. And those questions are either going to, the way they answer those questions are either going to move them forward for that emotional decision or move them backwards in a way. And so as marketers, we need to understand first what's going to trigger them emotionally. And then two, what are those logical questions they are going to ask specifically about your brand and your product? And I'll give you a framework for that in just a second. And we need to answer them in a way that moves them forward. And so let's take the shoe example. Like I mentioned before, somebody is looking at a pair of shoes, they need to choose what size. Sometimes sizing is different based upon different types of brands. And so they need to be able to answer that question around, for your product, what size is right for me? Or let's say they're going on vacation and they're leaving in a week. It's like, okay, well, are these even going to get here in time? How fast are they going to ship? What does shipping cost, right? What's the material made out of? I'm going to the beach. Can these things get wet, right? Do I have to treat them? Do I have to break them in? How long is it going to take to break them in? These are all questions that as a buyer, you're going to ask very specifically about that product. And so when we think about this emotion plus logic framework, I think everybody kind of understands the emotional piece. That's where branding comes into play. That's where UGC comes into play. That's where video comes into play. But I think where a lot of people get it wrong is they don't spend enough time really deeply understanding what we like to call the 3 Ps. And so these are the questions that need to be answered by you as a brand. And so the questions are always about the product. That's the first P. So it could be materials, it could be sizing, it could be anything related to the product itself. The second P is what we call process. So this could be anything from how do I use the product? When it gets here, what do I do? Do I need to treat the shoes? Do I need to break in the shoes? It could be around shipping. How long is it going to take? Can I return them? What's your warranty policy, etc.? And then the third P is something we call perceived risk. So especially for first-time buyers, somebody who's buying from you for the very first time, they're going to have a certain level of perceived risk. And we call this perceived risk because at the end of the day, like, you know, you have a great product, you know, you're going to deliver your product, right? So there's no real risk, but every consumer making a purchase has a certain level of perceived risk. And perceived risk can go up or down depending upon price point, lots of different factors, but price is a big one. And so you need to understand, how do we reduce perceived risk of purchase? What are going to be those perceived risks that a buyer perceives as being a challenge or a barrier to them making that purchase, or something that could go wrong? And we need to address those. And things like great guarantees, return policies, exchange policies, using third party social proof, accreditations, anything that's going to help the bolster the sort of the social proof around the product that would help reduce somebody's perceived risk of making that purchase the very first time, because they see other people love it or there's other accreditations that are backing it up. So whenever you're thinking through a product page design, we always want to start first with, okay, understanding what drives that emotional decision for your brand. And then specifically for your brand and your product, what are going to be those questions that consumers are going to ask around product, process, and then perceived risk, and make sure you're answering those in a way that is actually going to move them forward with the purchase. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we start doing some teardowns, because we'll sort of apply some of this framework to the teardowns. But the idea is, start first with a great product page framework and layout that addresses this emotion plus logic and three P's framework. And then once you have that page in place, this is where analytics comes into play and becomes really effective for optimizing those pages and really understanding things like layout and hierarchy, where you should be positioning different messaging, etc. So I want to go ahead and jump over here and hand this over to Dylan and let him sort of talk through how you should be using heat maps to dial in those product pages once you already have them launched. All right, Dylan, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here and let you take over.
Awesome. Love the framework. It's pretty great. So first thing I want to start off, this is by no means a pitch for heatmap.com. This is for you guys, whatever you guys are using. This will hopefully be valuable to you guys. So again, no pitch here, just here to give value. And I'll say that a bajillion times because I'm not a salesman. I'm a data nerd that loves CRO. So diving into what this looks like. So Heatmap, we are actually the only on-site analytics platform that can really tell you how to make more money directly with AI insights and everything we've got here. So in the chat, anyone who doesn't really know what a heat map is, I'm gonna keep this open, pretty sure. Let me get a thumbs up just for some engagement, making sure you guys are there. Thumbs up if you guys know, thumbs down if you don't. I can give the basics if you don't, but give a yes or a no, something like that. I'm not gonna continue unless I get some emojis or some yes or no's. Louis from or Louis from New York, I think. Awesome. Seems like we got
Sounds like
some
a couple people know what a heat map is. Maybe we
cool.
need like a 30-second overview.
Awesome beauty. So what a heat map is it's a software that shows you where users are clicking on your website, right? So it's very useful to know, like something like Google Analytics, it shows you page by page what your metrics are. But heat maps specifically show you on the page level what's being clicked and what's not. The innovation we made at heatmap.com is that we are truly the only ones that show revenue-based heat maps. So what you can see here is these clicks that you see right here is all that traditional click maps, and I call them click maps, not really heat maps, right? Because they're just showing clicks. So the main point is you're supposed to see not just clicks, but revenue associated with it. I found some wild things where someone might be lighting up and thousands of people clicking on a specific element, but does that element lead to revenue or not, right? That's what we want to know. We don't care if you give your boss or your founder or you are the founder and you're like, wow, I got more clicks on my navigation. That's great. If you don't know if that leads to revenue or not, that's really not great, right? No one's going to pat you on the back for getting more clicks. So that's really what's important. So revenue per click, revenue per session for a specific element, all mission critical to have. So on PDPs, there's three main things that I look for, right? So there's specifically, Carrie did ask, how do you see that click location? I'll show you in just a second. You can see it's right here. It's actually lit up in red, right? So you'll see that there's some yellow around it. Yellow means not as many people clicked. Red is where the darkest red is where the most people clicked. So it's kind of like a sliding scale. If you see light green, it means just a couple. You see yellow, you see orange, it's more, and then red is the most. So it's a very visual one once I open up the app and show you guys. So there's three main elements I care about, which is your product image and product gallery. I put those together as one group. Number two are color swatches, options, bundles, things like that. And number three are accordions, right? Accordions usually meaning FAQs or more details. That's something I know Eric is going to jump into, so I don't want to steal too much thunder over there, but that really is something that I do like. So right here, let's take an open one. This is a fashion brand that sells leather goods. So one thing when you're doing CRO, always go top down, right? If you're looking above the fold, meaning the top part before you scroll, 100% of people see that. You scroll down two or three buckets, you might be at 30, 40% of people actually seeing that. So why optimize something that 30% of customers see when you can optimize something that 100% of customers see? So always go top down when you're doing CRO. So
And
what
Dylan, real quick, Carrie's asking, how do you see that click location? How does that work?
Yeah. So it's these red dots right here, right? So you can see the more concentrated ones are where people are clicking. And what you could do just in our UI, so you can see 579 clicks, 1200 clicks. So this second one literally got double the number of clicks. This one, 14, even more. So that's triple the number of clicks. So as you click on each of these elements, that one has 6 times the number of clicks. So clearly, a lot of people are interested in this one right here. I wonder what this looks like. That's just going to be a side angle of the bag with a person right there. So this is actually, these two images are the only two in this product gallery that actually have humans in it, which is very positive. So, and yes, it's an app overlay. So effectively, number one that I look at is our product gallery. So this is just a plain image. This is another plain image. What we like to use is revenue per click and revenue per session. These are the proprietary metrics we've got, but like you guys should be looking at. There are other ways to hack it together with other softwares, but let's just go based on this with an assumption. So every time someone clicks this product in the carousel, you make $9.30. Someone clicks here, $10. Here, 965, here 939, and 971. So clearly these just plain product shots are not doing as much for you. This one right here, let's see if we can actually zoom in and check out what this looks like. So this is really, this is actually an open version of the bag. So you're able to see the bag from the top. That's something that a lot of these customers care about and leads to the most revenue. So what you're really able to do very simply, take your product gallery, look at revenue per click, rearrange them based on revenue per click. And if one is really sky high compared to the others, test actually making that element in the product gallery the hero image of that product, like the featured image. So that's a great tactic. Again, takes no code, took you just 2 or 3 minutes like you saw there. Rearrange them from highest to lowest revenue per click and revenue per session. And if one is really sky high, put it right here. So there's product gallery and images. That is number one that I had shared. So number two are these drop downs here. So in the designer's note, this shows details on, what it looks like. So now revenue per session is 36 cents. Here we have 73 cents. So if people click details, you make 3 times the amount of money as the designer note. Shipping and support, this one right here is 11 cents. So people don't care about shipping and support as much. Sustainability, right here, no one cares about it, at least for the buyers, right? So I actually made a hot, spicy tweet today that no one cares about giving to charity and, sustainability. It's getting lit up on Twitter right now if you guys want to go look, where I'm getting a lot of flack for it, but founder stories work a lot better. So clearly, numerically, based on this data, people don't care about sustainability. So if you have content all throughout your website about your sustainability, get rid of it. This is indicative proof that people don't want that type of content. Very basic
Yeah,
and
too
important.
too funny. Eric can speak to that too on our side, but we've tested that many times for brands, and it never performs very well.
No, people think that, especially a lot of like Gen Z buyers that are now coming into some, disposable income as they get older, they care a lot about it and social causes and as they speak, but when they're buying, it has like there's some brands that are centered around it, like Patagonia. They're
Sure.
very centered around the ocean and things like that. REI, if you guys are fellow rock climbers like I am, like a lot of those sports, like they give back. They're B Corps actually, meaning they're required to give to charity. So there's some that does work on, which is great. And then the other thing that I really look for down here is so this is the true FAQ. And being able to take a look at these, very important, but also what testimonials, because there's things that you're able to click and see what lead to revenue. that even if they're not a direct CTA. So this, I love my Cali. The grass green is lovely. This one is the Cali is well designed sling bag that conforms nicely. So if you think about it, if you have two featured testimonials here, people love the color and leads to more sales versus leading more of it conforming and maybe being a flexible bag. The thing about heat maps is people think when you're just clicking on specific areas, all they do is just look at that area and try to optimize that area. But the true CROs, whoever named it conversion rate optimization, should be pushed off a cliff because conversion rate sucks. It's not a useful metric. It's actually a
Couldn't
terrible
agree more.
metric to look at. So I'm known online as the F conversion rate guy. So that's kind of big POV of mine, and just based by a lot of data. So yeah, that's really what we care about. That CRO is really like business optimization. It's not just your website, right? Like you can see here, based on what I was showing here before, if you have any sustainability in your email marketing, get rid of it, ditch it. It's not working. If you have more details, you should give more details in your email, maybe in your meta ads, maybe in your Google ads. People want more of this type of content of details on the bags. They don't care about it as much, or they're not as motivated to buy if they look at the designer's note. So the true CROs that are really crushing it on heat maps, the main thing is it's not just about tweaking your PDP and looking at tiny things like that. It's really about taking your data, understanding the content, and leveraging it everywhere else. The last little nugget I'll leave you with, I've run over 4,000 split tests, have data on every single one of them. 80% of those winning split tests are literally just copywriting changes or changing images. Not the whole crazy complex rebuilding your whole website, just copywriting, be clear, images, show visually, be clear. And that's what I'll leave it with.
Yeah, I would double click on that as well. We like to think, for one, couldn't agree more with you in the idea that the concept of conversion rate optimization is a terrible term. It's all about revenue optimization, right? Business optimization.
Exactly.
Conversion rate is just one metric. And the way that we think about it as well is it's like compounding interest, right? It's the end of the day, you're going to get way more bang from the buck by going through and making consistent data-driven tweaks and optimizations to the site than you will by embarking on a massive redesign where you're making a lot of guesses based upon best practices. And so we approach it the exact same way. All right, Eric, let's hand this over to you. I think Dylan did a great overview of sort of the value of heat mapping. So let's talk a little bit about, or why, value of heat mapping, how it works. Now let's get really tactical and let's talk about specifically within your PDP, how can you make some adjustments, or what are the three major learnings and adjustments that you would be looking to make based upon heat map data?
Yeah. So when it comes to this heat map data, really where it stands out, I think its value to us in terms of optimizing websites and businesses is that it shows you visually how users are interacting with the site, what they're clicking on, what they ignore, what they maybe scroll past, and most importantly, which of those interactions then translates to some revenue capture. This helps us optimize layouts, contents, and calls to actions. And it's really different than the data that we get in Shopify or Google Analytics. So for example, Dylan showed a bunch of great examples of like accordions, right? Oftentimes we see on product detail pages, there's a lot of information hidden in those accordions. But there's no metric in Shopify, or unless you have a custom event set up in GA4, that's going to tell you clicks on those different accordions, right? Those are all URL based platforms. So you'll never be able to see in those platforms how many people are clicking on these and how often that translates into better performance. So one way we always want to be using heat maps, this is one of the first things that I always do when we open up a heat map on a product detail page, is look for the items that we currently have a blind spot in terms of data and utilization. If we're just using our Shopify or whatever your platform is, their data, or like even GA, looking for the gaps, right? Because let's fill in those gaps first with a tool like heat mapping. That allows us to identify which ones are getting the most clicks. If it is like your product descriptions versus details, what we want to do is make sure that the ones that are getting the most clicks are the ones that are most easy to find. We want to follow your user behavior. If we can build a website that follows user behavior, then it's going to meet the needs of more users and in turn will enjoy a better conversion rate as a result of it. So we always want to make sure that we're making that high demand information easier to find. We also want to make sure that that's translating to purchases. So I think that's a really important piece of why tracking revenue is important too, not just activity. Because if you make something clickable, people will click on it, but that doesn't always mean that those clicks translate to some revenue capture. Oftentimes we'll see, for example, the more someone clicks on your like shipping and return policy, if you don't have a favorable shipping and return policy, the more activity you see on that element could be translating to less purchases. So understanding this type of information helps us optimize the business in the case of maybe updating some of those shipping policies that could be impeding purchase, as well as understanding which elements of the site are attracting the most clicks. That tells us what information users need to have in order to feel confident to purchase. I think this one is becoming increasingly important because one thing that we're seeing, this year, I think over the last like 12 months really, is the utilization of audiences answering those questions of questions about the product, perceived risk, and process, right? These logical answers that people are looking for, this information, they used to only have like your website as a resource. Maybe they might Google some things. Maybe they might look on social for some of this information. But now all of that information is so much more easily accessible through LLMs. So a user can very easily leave your website if they're not getting the answers that they need, plug that prompt into ChatGPT or whatever LLM they're using, get all the information they need, but also a bunch of other recommendations, right? So if we're not answering all of the questions as efficiently as possible for users, then we run the risk of sending them offsite to go get that information. So this tactic is really moving us towards the goal of answering all of the questions that a user might have within the controlled environment of our website.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Really about dialing it in, making sure that one, you can have all the right information on the page, but if it's not in the right order and it's not being displayed correctly, then it's not as effective. All right, Eric, do you want me to go to the next one here?
Yeah, let's take a look at the next one. So the next one is optimizing media and imagery. So Dylan had a great example of this too with the bag company, right? Is how can I use clicks and purchases on different imagery on the website in order to understand which ones are most valuable to users? So, for example, how many users are scrolling through, this additional media? If no one's clicking through to see the additional media, it's a good indication that it's not valuable. Maybe it doesn't need to be there, or maybe it needs to be reshot or recast in terms of what types of imagery we're putting there. We can also really quickly look at the clicks and activity and use that to understand, oh, maybe we can reorder these to make sure that the most relevant information is the one that's presented first on the product detail page, as well as potentially pulled through to other formats, whether that's offsite in ads, like in the like bag example. We saw the version that had the inside of the bag getting a ton of clicks. That's an important piece of intelligence for us to say, okay, users want to understand what the interior of this product looks like. So maybe that's something that I want to make sure that that is, maybe that's the second image on the product detail page. On my collection page, maybe that's the alternate image on hover that I show. Maybe offsite in the acquisition phase, maybe I'm building a little bit of a video that shows, a user placing things into the different pockets in that bag to show both the space and the utility. The intelligence that we can get from heat maps on the website really can create a halo effect in terms of giving us data to operate the business upon, even beyond just the product detail page. This is also really helpful, I think, in understanding future content creation. So like, for example, in the bag instance, right? If we didn't have that video, seeing all the clicks on the still image of the interior, that's a good indication to us that, hey, maybe we want to go build out this concept further. Or let's say for a single product in your catalog, you have one really good video and you know that it takes a ton of time, effort, and resources to go make product videos. You can then add that to your product detail page, maybe A/B test adding that to your product detail page, look at the clicks on it, and get a really good understanding of the cost and benefit analysis of taking the time to create that type of content and then measuring the impact that it has on how many people are then seeking that out. And then of those people who seek it out, how much more likely are they able to purchase? With those base metrics, you can easily calculate a cost benefit analysis of going out and creating any content that's heavier lift than, just a studio image.
Yeah, and I love this concept, and I think this is where folks don't quite think through sort of the second, third order consequences of being able to measure this type of information on site and really taking the time to understand what customers are doing on site. Is that it doesn't just affect how you optimize the product page, right? These are all learnings that should be shared throughout the entire organization. They should be shared with your paid media team. Like, use this data to make business-driven decisions that are going to scale the business, not just making decisions on how to lay out a product page. I think that's a really,
Alan,
really
I'm
important
so
takeaway.
happy you said that. So as I ran a CRO agency similar to Blue Stout for 5 years,
Yep.
and the one thing I noticed is all of our nine-figure brands, I saw them sharing it with their ad agencies, their
Uh-huh.
install team, their retention team, their SMS teams or softwares even. Like I saw 30 invites to our deck that we made so everyone could go benefit from it, not
Yep.
just your developer or your designer. It's not this.
Yes.
The
Yep.
companies that win are taking these learnings and putting them frickin' everywhere. And that is the
Yep.
difference between calling it CRO and profit optimization.
Yeah,
Really.
exactly. That's exactly right. And this is something that I think a lot of our clients when they onboard, they don't quite understand or grasp early on because they come in the door thinking like, okay, we got to improve conversion, got to improve conversion. It's like we know we have to teach everybody. At the end of the day, it's like, look, what you're going to learn through this process is way more valuable than just optimizing a page. You should be taking this data and you should be leveraging this everywhere you can because you're going to develop a deeper understanding of why your customers buy, how they buy, what triggers that purchase decision, what drives them through to completion. Like that is all data that can be leveraged throughout the entire customer journey on every marketing stack and tool you're using. So it's really, really important to use this not just on site but for everything else. All right, Eric, I think let's go ahead and let's hit your last point here, and then we'll start fielding some live teardowns. I'll start taking a look at a few of these URLs in the chat while you go through this last point.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah. The last one, I think we would just be remiss if we didn't touch on scroll depth when it comes to heat mapping. So scroll depth, really important, right? Dylan touched on how we can utilize this to prioritize optimizations, right? Like you start at the top of the page because you know that is the place where everyone's going to see. I think we can also utilize it to better understand which information should be presented in which hierarchical order. So if you have a content block, for example, of like unique value propositions that's really far down the page, we want to know what percentage of users are being exposed to this messaging. In particular, when it comes to revenue, if you have a cross-sell, upsell widget a little bit farther down your page, then we want to know not just how many people are clicking on that, but what impact is that having on revenue. For example, if you have like the one on the right here where the you may also like is higher on the page, but if that's recommending products that are at a lower price, you don't want to just see clicks on it. You also want to know that, hey, these recommendations are effectively downselling users to less revenue capture in their session. So understanding revenue and activity, super important when it comes to product recommendations, but also really helpful in understanding how the exposure relates to the depth of scroll. So if something is farther down on the page and we see, okay, this is getting a lot of interaction. People are clicking on it, people are seeing it. Then that's a good indication to us that, hey, we want to move this up on the page. Could we generate an additional 10 percentage points of exposure with a slight placement adjustment by moving it a little bit higher in the hierarchy? This is a great thing we can couple with A/B testing, just with a simple, what I call like an evaluation test. You hide or show a secondary or tertiary section of the product detail page. in order to understand how valuable it is to users. This is a great low lift way to start optimizing your site, just like testing copy or imagery, right? You don't have to go out and start designing a bunch of new stuff, new like sections and redesigns. It's really about taking the ingredients you have and making sure they're presented in the most optimized fashion. So we can just test a version, a split test showing versus hiding a certain section in order to understand the value of each of those sections. And then once we get that data back, then that's a good indication to us. Okay, if it's adding value, let's move this a little bit higher. We're going to increase the exposure of this section to more and more users based on the value that we're seeing.
Love it. No, that's awesome. That's right. That's one of
Okay.
sort of the classic advantages of heat mapping is scroll depth. Go ahead, Dylan. You were saying something?
Yeah, one thing to drop in as well, team, which is a lot of like a lot of brands don't have the luxury of true A/B tests to get to statistical significance and more importantly, statistical power, which most people don't know about if you don't go research it. So there's actually two types of tests that people, the second one is, it sounds kind of funny, but there's a split test or an A/B test where you're truly giving 50/50 traffic. There's also something just called a live test, which is just change it on your website and observe the metrics. So one thing I encourage, especially if you're working with a dev agency, things like that, you're able to go make the move, take a look at GA, take a look at your heat maps. You're able to actually go and look at what those changes are. And number two that you said, Eric, one thing that I love is for a lot of our customers, they try like over explaining. And some of our first split tests that we ran in the agency were just removing content. And they'd be like, but it's not like coming across here. I'm like, hey guys, just give us like a month. Let us show you the numbers. Some of the easiest and simplest split tests that take no dev whatsoever is just right click delete in a split test software and go ahead for it, or go and hide it, like you said. So couldn't agree more that what you guys should not like you guys should be looking at is like, hey, what's unnecessary on my website that's creating scroll depth, which or sorry, creating scroll debt, which is a big thing as Eric and Alan have been talking a lot about, the percent of customers that actually see elements. Scroll debt is the further down on a page, the less people see it. So get rid of a lot of scroll debt and let people go to the impactful sections. So removing, highly recommend, versus all the dev design and everything you got to do to add content if you're not currently split testing.
And removing all of those sections, I think, really creates real estate that you can use more impactfully, right? Like first, let's get the stuff out of there that's not helping, because especially if it's really prominent, right? Like in your buy box at the very top of the PDP, the first thing I want to do is rip out all the stuff that isn't advancing the cause, because that's then secondarily going to give us the opportunity to use that real estate more effectively.
Yep.
Yep, that's exactly right. I double click on all of that. You can, a lot of our biggest wins are literally just removing things from pages. It's wild. It's amazing. All right, guys, we've got about 20 minutes left in the hour. So I'm going to let's go ahead and start doing some teardowns. I think let's go. We've got so many URLs in the chat here that you guys have shared. I'm just going to start randomly picking out a few and we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. So unless Dylan, you've
So,
got anything
Alan,
for to start with.
one thing, yeah, if you want to go ahead and share screen, can I get one selfish request of one of these pages in here?
Of course. Are you able to see my screen right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool.
Go over Dennis, put Jocko Fuel in there.
Yeah,
Recent
I
new
saw that as
customer
well.
of heatmap, so I just want to give a little extra love. The other ones we can choose. So I just saw that name and saw it come in recently. So hello, Dennis. Welcome to the heatmap gang. But yeah, I just wanted to go in and take a look.
I'm going to I pick three from three very different verticals because I think we can get some learnings from sort of apparel. We've got sort of wellness, and then we've got Jocko, which I would probably put in like, supplement nutrition, right? So let's go ahead and start here with Paka, if I'm saying that correctly,
Also,
Paka.
Alan, if you could right click inspect so we can look at mobile, I think that might be a little bit more value to be able to give to them on mobile.
You can definitely look at mobile. So I'm going to let you guys lead the charge. Both of you guys lead the charge on this one, and I will just drive the scroll. So Eric, Dylan, you guys go ahead.
First, if you don't mind widening that, maybe like 30% just to get a more realistic. Yeah,
Right
right
about
there.
there.
Perfect.
There
Yep.
you go.
Amazing. Thank you. All right. So First thing that I'm looking at right here, guys, this is something that if this doesn't work, I will personally send you $100 Amazon gift card. If you have any text that is less than 14 point font, go make it 14. 12 is barely visible. 10 is virtually invisible. So if I had to take a guess, even if you wanted to inspect it, right? Like what you're looking at there, unisex, and even the reviews, like I have a hard time believing that those are above that those are not 12. So those are really hard to read. So that's number one. So go do that globally on your whole website. Like not just here, but easy win in the bag. Just do it. And Gino, I saw how do you check? Alan, I'm sure you know how to just, right click and look on the
Yeah,
inspect
hold on.
function.
Yeah.
So right there you can pull over the code and you'll be able to see the size right in there.
I am not.
See.
Should be over in the styles panel. But yeah, if you go to inspect and then just click anything on your website, or I use a Chrome browser extension called Font Ninja that just saves me the time from jumping in there. You activate that and you can just hover anything on the front end of your website and it'll tell you all of the type styles that are associated with that piece of your style sheet.
Ooh, Tailwind. That's a doozy if you guys are using Tailwind. But respect. So Austin, we want to scroll down a little bit and take one
Yeah.
other thing, by the way, team. On those font sizes, 18 point font on price. There's this big misnomer where, especially luxury websites, it pisses me off so much that people think the bigger the price, the more quote unquote it feels expensive. That is BS. The things that when people first look at the fold, they want to see, what am I buying? What the heck does this thing do? And how much does it cost? Those are the three things like people have in their head. So if the price is buried, the color options are buried, and the image is not the best, then, there you go. Like that's not great. So, that's one to go through. So, Eric, Allen, I'll let you rip it up, but those are the first things I was seeing.
Yeah, totally backing all of those. And I would say the first thing that jumps out at me is that little arrow to advance through product imagery. When it comes to apparel, right? Like understanding what it looks like probably more so maybe if you group jewelry into this category as well, but more so than almost every other product category, the imagery is what's going to sell a piece of apparel, right? That's going to be the primary consideration. Sure, secondarily, people are going to want to know something about like the sourcing, right? It sounds like materials are an important differentiator for this particular brand, but I would really want to know first and foremost with my heat mapping is especially on mobile. How many people are clicking that little arrow? Do they see that? Do they know that there's more images of this product to view? And then how does that compare to the desktop heat map in terms of when you're already showing all of those thumbnails? I would imagine that the click rate on the thumbnails on desktop is far, far greater than the amount of advancing that's happening on the mobile layout. So oftentimes we'll see this where it looks nice and streamlined from a user experience standpoint to, kind of push all of those secondary media to like a secondary user experience so that it lives in either a couple three little dots or you just swipe through it and it's almost like become like a surprise and delight almost, right? To scroll and be like, oh, there's more images. That's not where we want to do a surprise and delight, right? We want people to know that there's more images that we can go see of this product, especially in the case of Paca, right? Like it looks like you put a lot of effort into, getting the timing right, maybe even hiking a mountain in order to go get this imagery. So we want to make sure that the effort that you put into capturing these great images are getting seen by all of your prospective customers.
Yeah, I've noticed a very big trend. I was just drawing that right here, which is so the difference is if you have these images here, especially for fashion or anything that's visual, supplements maybe less because you're showing, box consumables, you're just showing something like that. But something as visual as something like this, that's where they're making their purchase. For them to automatically see all these different versions of what they want to look at, That's huge. That is tremendous. So I've seen a trend of product galleries. So this right here, as it's called, is called a product carousel, meaning it's like swiping as a carousel. This right here is a product gallery. And I find a trend of galleries outperforming carousels.
Awesome. I love it.
So I think we ripped this enough. We want to go to the next one and keep the juice
Let's keep
flowing.
momentum going here. Want to look at Jocko on mobile as well?
Yes, sir.
Let's do it.
Awesome, Eric. Why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, so I think carrying through that one is a good instance, right? Is like the dots that you see here. Maybe that's not as valuable for this product category. What we do find valuable for this product category when it comes to image creation is almost taking a little bit more of the Amazon approach, where we're putting a lot of the product information about the product, like attributes, size, servings, maybe cost per servings, into graphics that we include in the product imagery. But there's a lot of information. So how do we find out which information has really warranted inclusion in a graphic in this imagery? Is looking at heat maps and clicks on content lower on the page. So lower on the page, I would imagine, I've never seen this site before, but I would imagine there's going to be a bunch of information down here, right? There's some iconography communicating reasons to purchase. There's some video, a bunch of accordions for like use cases, a lot of like standards and certifications. Where people are clicking on these is a great indication of what type of content you should include in those images. Because if we can get people to scroll through those images and see reasons to purchase, get all the information that they need about the product in order to feel confident in making a purchase, then we've also effectively successfully kept them at the top of the page where they can add to cart, right? The more information we can get into the top of the page, the more likely people will see it, and they'll see it right in the same viewport in which they can take action on whichever message it is that resonates with them and tips them from someone who's considering a purchase to someone who's ready to action.
Yeah, and I would double click on it and say the more information that they care about, right? Because I think what we see a lot of times is we see a lot of brands just shoving a lot of text and content into sections of the site without really thinking through very specifically, okay, that's too much. How do we isolate the three components that we know drive sales? And then, Eric, to your point, right? Like going ahead, especially we've seen this with lots of tests we run in the supplement space, right? Is that including that information in this first image graphic tends to perform really well.
Agree. Beautiful. I've got a couple of spicy call outs here. Okay, so number one, again, CRO, top down. Um, these are becoming more and more of a trend, right? Please have those on your homepage. Please test removing them from your product pages. You are begging people to move away from your product page. On the homepage, it's almost like an easier version of this navigation. But when you have them on your product pages, I've removed them globally from product pages and seen a tremendous lift. So again, without seeing heat map or anything type of data on it, that's a hunch that I've always seen, right? So that's number one. Can you click this right here for me? Does this bring to a new website or something?
That's a slider.
Okay, beautiful. I was gonna say, if it brings you somewhere else, that's great. So cool. No notes on that. This price, come on, guys. I can barely read that.
Yeah, I missed it. I had to find the price when I was looking at this the first
Yeah,
first time around. I couldn't even find it.
exactly. And prices often do well around here, like right by
Yep.
the name. It's like, what's
Yeah,
it called? What's the price? What am I looking at? Right.
exactly.
So that's a big one. So Jocko, if you please right away make those prices way bigger, way bigger. This is so hard to read. Now, this is a spicy one, everyone. Get these away. This was literally like 2015. I have noticed, I've watched thousands of screen recordings. These quantity selectors, if you look at the revenue per click and revenue per session of quantity selectors and PDPs, people don't use them anymore, or at least they don't lead to revenue. What they do is add to cart, and then in that cart or in the cart, they then go in and increase the number of units. So the quantity selector, unless it's a bundle, but then you should have the bundle builder, right? So I highly recommend testing. If any of you guys in this call have a quantity selector, please, I beg of you, make sure it's globally on all your PDPs, not just one PDP. Remove your quantity selector. something I've tested again and again, works beautifully. So yeah,
And
all this text is way small. And also curious, Alan or Eric, have you guys tested that or observed that in anything?
yeah, we've seen a big shift towards that too, unless it's something that's really, really oftentimes purchased in multiples. We almost never see people make that decision to purchase in multiple at the point of purchase on the product detail page. They're always doing that in the drawer cart or on the cart page if you have one of
Yeah.
those. So yeah, we see a lot of the same. And like here, it even is given greater priority than the add to bag, right? Like it sits in front of it. Another thing I would add here too, I know we probably got to move on quick to the next one here, but um another thing I think would be a really interesting test, or maybe even something to look at some heat maps on, is the drop down for flavors, right? I think that flavors are a major reason that people are going to make the purchase, right? Is that's something that they're going to want to know instead of like passively communicate. Like you see chocolate milkshake, but if you're like, oh, that's not the flavor that I want, you want to passively present all of that information to users so that they know about the options that they have. Same as price, right? That's probably the next thing they'll look at after price is, okay, what options do I have? So even though that'll probably push your add to bag button a little bit farther down the page to display all of those passively, I expect that there's a little bit of leakage in your funnel in terms of tucking them into that drop down menu.
Alan, can you do me a solid and click on one of the other ones in the drop down? I just want to see if they're dynamic.
Yeah, changes page or not. It
Okay,
looks like,
cool. It does.
yeah,
It
it is.
does.
It's all
Awesome.
variant based.
And it's a query string still beautiful. So yeah,
Yep.
that would make me even more agree with Eric. I also agreed with it anyways. Last one that I have to say, or I'm gonna cry. Okay, so subscriptions, subscribe and save. This guy right here, just saving a little bit of money, but you're making a larger commitment, not useful. What you need to do is bring this down, make it larger, and give 3 reasons why they should subscribe. So if it's protein powder, it's like stay high performance in the gym, never have to remember to never run out. Like there's reasons you can give for why people should subscribe. It's like save 20%, always be fueled in the gym, never have to remember to get Jocko Fuel again. So having USPs for why people should do the subscription option 10x value. I've seen literally a 50% jump in the ratio of one time to subscription. So if any of you guys in this call have subscriptions on your site, please go and add USPs to that box.
And the one thing I'll
Here's
add to
why
that, and we'll jump to
too.
the next one too, is that, also like testing into making one-time purchase versus subscription the default. Maybe this was tested into and one-time purchase one, but I think the argument would be that you're not making a good enough pitch as to why subscription should be the first order priority. Go ahead, Eric. What were you gonna say?
As you flip over, I was just going to say, like, the reason that I think telling more reasons to purchase around the subscription is really valuable is because 10% discount on a subscription is kind of table stakes at this point, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's important is to communicate those USPs because why? They're unique, right? Those are the unique reasons that you can offer a user of here are the benefits of subscribing, right? Like never waste a workout by always having it on hand, right? Those types of statements are really helpful because it communicates the benefit and convenience and utility of that subscription, not just feeling like I'm signing up for a bigger contract than I initially anticipated.
Cool. All right. So this is now more in the sort of the wellness space. Let's talk about salt.
Oof, tiny. Everyone's doing this.
Look at this, right? They're talking about the price point down
Yeah,
here.
just
Yeah,
all that
it's
stuff.
hidden. It's also just in a weird position. It's you miss it. You have to
Yeah.
find it. I
Yeah,
think
move
that's
it to
my
the right.
challenge.
Like this is like right over here, like over to
Yeah,
the right of it. If
right
it
up.
allows, always have it right there. It's amazing. It works really well. One other thing too, this size chart right here, 10 out of 10. This is something that is
Yes.
really good. Those size charts are mission critical because as I'm sure you guys know, like for me, I'm between like a 10 and a half or an 11 shoe size, at least American for like, depending the brand. So size chart, mission critical. Other thing I would do here is potentially take these and put them over the size because having sizes is not necessarily going to influence your purchase, but having colors that you like will. So as Eric was saying before in Jocko Fuel, they should have it. Highly recommend having it possibly at the top before any of these other options, because again, especially for anything that's wearable, color and appearance matters so much. So that's one I would definitely recommend to test.
Especially if you are, I love that one. Also because it is right, it's wearable. I want to see what it looks like. So if I'm scrolling through those, right, like you could get to a point where you're seeing all of those and tapping through the different options in color, but not seeing the images change. So I do agree, like those are probably a little bit far too down. I'd be curious also to make sure, like to just double click on the size chart to make sure that that doesn't take you off page. I think that is like 10 out of 10 placement. Perfect. Okay, cool. Now 10 out of 10 execution too. A lot of times I'll see those take people off of the page, which I think is a big missed opportunity, right? Like you have someone who's in the checkout lane and then you're taking them out to go get more information. While it's 10 out of 10, I think to have that grouped with the rest of the size options, we always want to make sure that that information is then presented on page, not taking users somewhere else on the site to get that information.
Love it.
How do we feel about this sticky navigation at the bottom here?
That's actually what I was going to comment on. So I have two comments right here if you stay on this screen. First off, adios amigo, get rid of that. Other reason why you should get rid of that. Buy three, save 10, buy five, save 15, buy seven, save 20. Why wouldn't you guys just have those as bundle options here, right? Buy three, five, like seven kind of thing. Like just put those there so it's one click instead of burying it behind this tiny text.
Yeah,
Also,
you're forcing somebody to do work here versus making it easier.
get rid of this right here. Every single time I've ever tested removing a secondary call to action in the same like space, nothing but a lift. We literally got a 10% lift globally on a site recently just by removing that second button on PDPs. The way I explain those, it's like asking for a hug and a kiss at the same time. It's like kind of awkward, right? Like you can't really do both. It's like, I don't know. It's like, or like asking for a handshake and a hug at the same time, whatever. It's like, really weird to have two different call to actions that do different things. So like maybe on SaaS websites where it's like get an audit versus book a call kind of thing, those make sense. But in ecom, no way. You need one call to action because you want them to do one darn thing, which is go buy. So either have buy it now or have add to cart, but do not have both of them.
Awesome. Any other feedback we'd give here?
And that bar, I would, whoever this is, I would be fascinated. If you guys want to email Dylan at heatmap.com, I would adore seeing the data on this. I have never seen a sticky like nav type thing on the bottom. I've never seen this. So
I
I
would
would
say this is
actually
this is a
love.
first for me too. I've not seen this
Yeah,
before.
that's a first for me. So I would adore whoever site this is. Like, shoot me an email and like, I'm happy to give you a whole deeper teardown or whatever, just to be able to get some data on that. That would be amazing. It's just Dylan at heatmap.com. Like, I'll share with Alan and Eric too, just because this is a first. I've never seen it. I'd love to see if it's actually good or not. So
Yeah. I think
super.
I'd love to look at analytics on this too and just see what customer pathways are looking like, how many people are using it, and where they're going from here, and whether or not it's actually driving revenue through those links.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah,
awesome. I think we're near time and
I
nailed the
think
three
we
that we
are.
wanted to.
I think we're
Um,
at time. All right,
I think
guys. Well, I want to say thank you to Dylan for joining us today, and Eric as always. And then, guys, the last pitch I'll just make for everybody who's still here is that if you did attend today's webinar, we are offering 50% off of our full store analytics and site audits. And so we will actually dive into your GA data. If you have heat mapping set up, we will look at your heat map data, and we will provide a full strategy, analytics, and optimization strategy for how to optimize the site. And that audit is typically a paid audit, and we're offering it for 50% off. So if anybody here today wants to take us up on that offer, you can just go to bluestout.com/strategy and book a call. You can also email me at Allen, ALLEN, at bluestout.com, and we'll set you up. Dylan, any closing remarks on the heat map front?
No, I'm happy to say I'm blessed at this point where if I can ever give some support to you guys, assuming it doesn't take crazy amounts of time, Dylan at heatmap.com or just find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever the heck. I don't check LinkedIn, but Twitter or email. Super happy to help. If I can support you guys in your journey, you need intros, you need whatever. If you're doing any CRO, go to Blue South. They're literally world class. Can't recommend enough. But otherwise, if I can support you guys at all, just email me and I'm more than happy to help.
Awesome. Dylan, we should do this again. This was a good one.
Deal and deal.
Awesome, guys. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one. We'll be doing another one of these in September.